call this meeting to order. The Election Commission on July the 29th at City Hall. Jenny, would you please call the poll?
Sure. Ms. Ireland?
Present.
Mr. Lehman?
Here.
Mr. Treadwell?
Here.
Ms. Nelson?
Here.
Ms. Torkelson?
Here.
Ms. Ireland, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. At this point, we've got a records request, and I'd like to turn the meeting over to Jamie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with us today, we have Barbara Jones, we have Jessica Willoughby from the Department of Law, and we have Dee Ennis, who has been working with the clerk's office on some legal matters. And I just wanted to, so you probably know Jessica has attended some of our commission meetings in the past. She represents the clerk's office on elections matters and can also represent the commission as well, as long as those interests are the same. And I wanted to ask Jessica to give a brief overview on the purview of the role of the election commission.
Right, so thank you, Jamie. Let me just pull up my code here. Too many windows open, I apologize. And not only windows.
She's not kidding, respectful.
And I bet you.
You know
Okay. Right, so the Election Commission acts in an advisory capacity to the Assembly and the municipal clerk in the conduct of elections. So, in that capacity, I don't see processing records requests as per se part of the conduct of running elections, but perhaps this records request has brought up matters that the Election Commission wanted to discuss related to the running of elections. But in my work for the municipality, I also help with records requests, and I can say each department is generally responsible for processing records requests as they come in. They're responsible for the records they have legal custody of, is how we refer to it. And there's generally a legal review component as part of it, and I understand that this records request is getting processed by the Elections Commission. I'm sorry, the clerk's office, similar to other records requests.
I might say the elections team is handling it rather than the clerk's office, but either way, we do it the same way.
And so the clerk's office is preparing the responses to the request. It's before you now, and Mr. Lehman, I emailed it to you. For some of you, this may be the first time actually seeing the request. I would just ask that you please review it when you're able, and I'll be sending an email soon asking if you have any records that are responsive to the request. We have provided the required 2-day response. This morning I did send a partial response which included complaints and adjudication challenges, which addressed most of items 1 through 5, and then also some of 11 of the request. We also posted out all of this information on our website for transparency. And this partial response was provided, just wanted to note that this partial response was provided in the same month that we wrapped up a subsequent election to the election that's discussed in this records request. And we're also in the middle of summer where we're managing vacations. So we've been busy. So that is all I have related to the records request as far as an update for you.
Any other comments or questions from the commission?
Can we see a copy of your response to the records request that you filed on the 2-day and today?
Yep, it was emailed this morning and it was emailed to you guys as well.
But you didn't bring it up.
Through the chair, are you talking about the 2-day response or the one they did today?
Both.
Okay.
That was emailed today? I don't have anything. I didn't do anything.
Okay. Well, there's a Mass Election Commission email group that I thought you guys were all a part of that was CC'd. So essentially it's a link to the website that we created that has all of them. If you go to elections.org.
I'll forward it to everyone.
It's not in my junk either.
Yeah, she sent it to 11 people, including all 5 of you. So I will forward this to,
Didn't go.
Alaska Mama. Okay. There you go. I just forwarded it to you all.
There it is.
Should we take the time to read this then, to go through it?
You don't have to do that now.
Okay, so.
I mean,
What is our goal? What are we tasked with today?
I think the commission asked, one of the commissioners asked for this meeting.
Madam Chair, I at least made the informal request for the meeting. Thank you for having this meeting today. There may have been others who made the request as well. I made the request for really 2 reasons. First off, the letter was addressed to us by the mayor, as well as the city clerk and the deputy municipal clerk. And I thought it would be appropriate that if we discussed the letter, it would be an appropriate, respectful response to the mayor to do that and consider whether we want to make any additional comments or a separate response to the mayor. I'm not proposing one at the time, but I just believe that because the request was made to us that we look at it. The second thing is I believe this commission did a very good job, and I believe the clerk's office did a very good job in dealing with the many issues properly raised by the observers during the counting of the last election. And there are only a few questions in my mind that are not well answered, I guess is the best way to put it. Primarily the data processing ones that I'm not really that I don't really understand. And so I was interested in hearing about this. And then the only other reason why I felt it was important that we did this is because we've also, just going back to our procedures on counting and so forth, have made a list of some potential recommendations to the assembly on procedures, the clerk and the assembly on procedures and perhaps ordinance changes. And this may inform that process. So it was for those 3 reasons: respect for the mayor, understanding if we wanted to make any kind of response or had these same kind of questions, and to do that. So I wasn't proposing this as a long meeting. We haven't scheduled kind of the broader discussion that we've talked about in terms of legislative changes as yet. We've talked about some lessons learned, and I just think it's important to review the issues, that's all.
Would you like to respond to that, Julie? Can you hold over?
Well, having heard that information for the first time, I don't know that I'm prepared to answer the data processing questions. If you have specific questions, you can certainly email them to me and I can respond to them. And then as for potential recommendations to policies or procedures or ordinance recommendations that you'd like to make, I think you're certainly welcome to have those conversations.
Through the chair, we are currently working right now. Jamie made a list of items that are problematic for us in the code. They are, and we're working through them. One of them is simple as, what do the observers do with coats and backpacks? The observer manual, which was adopted by the assembly, says they can't have bulky coats or purses on the floor. But Dee Ennis, who was an observer liaison, says that that's problematic. We made a rack for them, and they have a rack where they can put stuff, but when they're working somewhere else in the election commission, you know, their purse is in a not public place, but it's still not secure. So we were discussing that. Do we need to make a code change or what? And what we decided to do, we have, I think, do we have 29 lockers? Or how many?
Around that.
Around 30 lockers. And we're gonna put some lockers up in the area for the observers. They'll be, and then you just put in your code, like if you're at, you know, a pool or something like that, you put in your code and put your stuff in, and then you know your code to get your stuff out. So that concern we've resolved with a policy change. And so we're going through all of those. There are some that may require code changes, and when we get our recommendations together, we'll bring those to the commission for review. And our target date is, well, we want it done. It has to be done before. Our preference is, you know, January 1st at the latest, December 1st is preferable. So anyway, we are working.
I crinkled my nose because we're aiming for August, and I'm thinking it might be September.
Right.
Because we want to run it through the commission and the Ethics and Elections Committee before it goes to the assembly. And so to accomplish all of that, we do need to get it done.
We're working on
August or September. So.
Yes. So you will see that and have that opportunity to comment on those proposed code changes.
And
Can I just say, to answer Amit's concerns a little bit more directly, we are dealing with the counting issue, especially the 0 with X over it. That will be codified. The signature mark issue, codes, use of cell phones, that was confusing to everybody. So we went through a list of all the things that confused us, both as liaisons and constant complaints from the observers, and you're aware of many of them, but all of those will be addressed. When we cannot do code changes, we're not going to do code changes. Signature, mark, counting will require code changes, and you're the first stop. And I've been saying September 1st, you are the first stop. It doesn't go anywhere past after the election. The elections and ethics committee is
Correct.
but you are next in line. We'll see all of these.
what is the Elections and Ethics Committee?
Do you want me to answer it, Barbara?
Through the
Yeah.
chair, the Ethics and Elections Committee it's a committee of the assembly. So it's
So
5 assembly members.
before we advise the assembly, you're going to a committee of the assembly, and then you're coming to us, or going to us simultaneously, or how does that work?
It was my understanding we were going to put it through the commission before we put it through the assembly.
Which is
Okay, I may be
the
wrong.
opposite of what
I
you
may
just
be
said.
wrong.
So.
I think it's usually simultaneous. Last year it was after, but the process is we need to get it done. And Last year, I think that it took the Ethics and Elections Committee probably a month to review it, and during that month, the commission saw it. There's no requirement for the commission to see it first, or the Ethics and Election Committee to see it first. The commission's has a duty to make recommendations. They can always make recommendations to the assembly, and you'll probably do it by a resolution. It's really irrelevant whether a committee of the assembly sees it first or second.
No, and this is a public meeting. I guess the point, and I don't have all of my notes from our process of the March election, but I think all of us came away from that with some suggestions. It sounds to me like many of them are being addressed in circles and so forth. One of the ones that strikes me that was on my list was, as you recall, we had not just the issue of is a mark a signature or vice versa, but there is also the issue of people who were in essence disenfranchised because their signature was not in the state database. And there's also the issue of were people given enough time to cure? And frankly, now watching the state election, we're much further ahead on both election integrity and the curing process than the state is, which is good, but there might be some improvements that we could all recommend together. That's all. I mean, it's not that I don't think that we would have a chance to convince or to review and comment on what you're putting together, but I think it would be good for us to know what is the universe that you're putting together as you're doing it, to see if there's other things that commissioners have suggestions on.
The universe is Title 28.
I get it. But that, okay, I'll go back and look at my list and send you a note if there was something. But I thought we were going to do after these two elections a bit of a postmortem discussion to see what else, what did we learn, what did not, one thing that this commission might want to consider is a recommendation to go back to in-place balloting as opposed to ballots by mail. We might want to consider that. It's a concern. I'm just saying it might be something that the commission might want to recommend. I don't know. It's a matter of debate across the country. And I believe that we've taken steps to maintain integrity there, but even some of the concerns that are involved in coats and hats and purses all have to do with ballot chain of command or ballot chain of custody in our hands, but we don't have a whole lot to say about chain of custody outside, and that's where many of the allegations in this letter came from, as an example.
Through the chair, I would like to point out that I understand that the commission, should be looking at this, and I think that one of the postmortems should be a final review of your manual, so we can make that part of the meeting when you do a postmortem, because we never finished finalizing your manual before the election. So we still have that on our list, and that might refresh your recollection about some of the issues that you're talking about. Again, the commission is entitled to make whatever recommendations for code changes they want to the assembly, but I would like to make one, clarification. Mr. Treadwell said that there were people whose ballots were not counted because they weren't in the state database. I believe there was one rejected signature for not having a reference signature in the state database. And I want to remind you that is good. Because it's good because most likely that person registered online and they didn't provide a signature. They have to have a signature, and if they don't have a signature, frankly, it could be somebody's dog that's registered. So that is good that we're rejecting that signature. That person was given an opportunity to cure, And if that ballot isn't counted, I think that's good. And it was one ballot in,
I don't remember for the record.
but it was very low.
It was
very low.
Madam Chair, I may have phrased it wrong. We threw out well over 1% of the ballots received in the spring municipal election. There are many elections in this country that turn on less than 1%. For many of the ones that were thrown out, they were on issues that probably could have been resolved between an election worker and a voter in person at the time of the voting. And obviously, the public policy issue we have to weigh here is, does mailing out, even though it's more convenient for administration, and it may open up voting to more voters, does it disenfranchise other voters who have no idea what their signature looks like and the 3 signatures on the state database, or have signatures that are not on the state database, or have some other disqualifying thing? And so that, I mean, it was the large numbers of what we threw out. And as we discussed, we expected the state primary, and we'll see again in, well, actually it was the state primary for the congressional seat, which was the first statewide one. They threw out more. But again, that's an issue there. The places where they threw out more were places that might be called an unjust disenfranchisement. It was mostly rural and less high income areas of the state. And so I guess, I think we should have a discussion about it. I don't have an answer to put forward at this time, but I'm just saying the thing that bothered me most about what we did this spring, we worked very hard, and the observers did a very good job, and Dee, you did a fantastic job of organizing all of that, is in the end, we threw out a whole lot of ballots. Okay? And I would aver that the number of ballots we threw out, we would not have thrown out had we had them as question ballots right then and there, where somebody has an ID, or the ID is verified with a picture, even though the signature is not there, and the cure issue is an issue that means a voter has to kind of come twice for something that may not be that voter's fault. How does the voter know whose signature is what on the database? And we're not coaching them because we don't want them to copy the signature. We talked about that a lot. So it's those kinds of issues that I think would be very important to be included in the discussion to the Assembly. Even to say we looked at this, and even though this is horrible, we think this is better with this system, that it lets more people vote than that system, and people will learn it. I don't know if that's the answer. I just think we ought to discuss it, that's all. It was
Any other comments? I've just noticed that there's been a lot of information going out about the upcoming election. And I think that's really good. I must compliment you on doing that. Not your work?
No.
Who's it?
Probably former Deputy Clerk Amanda Moser's work.
No, but it's really been out there, and so it's wonderful to see.
Amanda works for Alaskans for Better Elections.
Okay,
So
yes.
they did it. Amanda and Gail Fnumiai from the
Mhm.
State Division of Elections did a work session for the Assembly, and they're doing quite a few presentations all over. So
Okay, so they're putting out that information. Well, it's very good information, which is wonderful. Dee, you had a
Yeah,
comment?
I was just wondering, I would love to have more of the details of the detail type questions versus the overlarge question. For instance, when you mentioned enough time to cure, how the commission can go back through their notes and have immediate input to this working group, which involves Ralph DeWare, who's the MLMP attorney who sold MLMP, Dean Gates, myself, Barbara, and Jamie. So we have a very, a group that knows elections pretty well. I would love your input in it if we could do it in a timely fashion, whether that's calling me, writing me, you come to the next working group. Everybody's busy in the summertime, but boy, anything else, that any of you could remember, these are the ones that were glaring to us. And just so you know, that little group of, how many attorneys there? 4 attorneys and Jamie, as it turns out. Jessica wasn't part of that, but we spent probably 6 hours on the signature mark issue and changed our minds every meeting.
Oh, I remember that well.
Yeah. Well, we suffered greatly just so you can become.
Thank all of us for the burning the midnight oil on that. I think the big issue, Madam Chair, that I have is we threw out so many ballots. And we have to ask ourselves the question, is this because the public's learning a new way to vote? And that it's going to come down over time and we shouldn't mess with it? Or should we improve the cure process to maybe have a team of, I mean, if you think about it, if we have in-person voting, you hire, I don't know how many, 200 election workers on a,
In person?
Yeah.
600?
Yeah.
you hire 600. So fine, we're saving money by doing mail-out ballots. Well, hire 100 people to call and track down people to cure when, before we throw them out. I don't know. But I would urge the group working on this to take a look at the number of thrown out ballots that I think most of us that night believed were legitimate ballots. I don't think, I think we all came to the conclusion that even if we counted every one of them, that probably would not change the result of the election. But in many other elections, it could have. Just realize the public policy imperative to drop in-person voting and to go to mail-in voting was 2. 1, to save money, and 2, to try to make voting available to more people more easily, right? But on the other hand, if by making it more available to you more easily, you're more easily rejected, and you have a large, and in my mind, anything over 0.5% is not a good public policy outcome.
Madam Chair, I have a question. Yes. Keith, you're talking about the mail-in ballot and the people voting in person. Okay, I think the percentage is up considerably, isn't it, with the mail-in compared to persons walking in and voting in person? Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, on the state election, it was a higher turnout. Did we have a higher turnout as well, General?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as I say, that's the argument. Higher turnout, but then more people rejected,
Yeah, through the chair, I'm happy to put together some numbers for where we were in poll-based and where we have come with vote by mail, to include some of those things that you were mentioning as far as rejecting and how many were rejecting versus the increase in turnout. And I can potentially try to include costs as well. And I'm happy to provide some of that information for you for a future discussion.
That'd be helpful for me.
Madam Chair, to this letter, I look forward to reading the response. The issue that most concerned me is really one issue on terms of access to the computer and why was that necessary at that time? Why were observers not brought in? Is there a code change that we should recommend or a policy change that we should recommend? Because you know what? I am 99% sure in my heart that nobody was messing with the counting process. But perception makes a difference, okay? And there was a kind of a gap in notifying the observers or explaining why it needed to be done then. And and you had that. So that's why the complaint was filed, that's why it's in the letter. I respectfully would argue that it's an issue. And the mayor has offered to do a forensic audit. I would, as a member of the Election Commission, urge us to take him up on that offer and design one and help find a third-party person. So that's I'm stating that on the record. The second issue is, I don't know. I don't know, about the black or blue ink and so forth, but the second issue, and just, I think we all have to realize that with mail-out ballots, I mean, in the elections that I've been involved in for many decades, and so have you, we spend a huge amount of time on chain of custody, okay? But it's almost like being a fish hatchery where we let 17 million fish out in the ocean. We have no idea what happens to them until they come back, okay? And in this case, we send out more ballots than people live here. They're there, and we presume that we've got a good system to make sure that they come back properly. Not Atlantic fish sailing into a Pacific Stream type thing. But I guess my point is there more we could do with the post office? Is there a national legislative change we could work on with the post office? Could we, again, if you're talking about 600 workers versus sending a certified letter, can we work nationally to suggest that certified letters on ballots be, allow better tracking? I don't know. We threw out a whole lot of ballots because of postmarks. Those were probably not the voters' problem. They, and yes, they were, and no, they weren't. But I mean, sometimes you drop something in a mailbox and you don't know it's going to be hauled from Talkeetna and Anchorage before it's postmarked the next day after midnight. And so those are the loose pieces that I think are worthwhile examining. And so those are the two things in the mayor's letter that I'm particularly concerned about.
Through the chair, I know that there's been two recent federal bills introduced federally, and so I'm happy to do a little bit of research and provide those to you guys and try to give a little explanation about what. I know that some of the post office issues are incorporated in those bills that have been introduced, so I'm happy to provide you with them and try to give a little analysis.
Thank you, Jamie. Any other comments? Yes.
Is it, do you have on the same, I have different topics.
Madam Chair, could I respond to two other of Mr. Treadwell's comments?
Absolutely.
On the comment regarding access to computers and the blue or black ink, though the staff provided responses to those observer complaints, and I would just encourage the commission to review those, and if you have any questions for us after you've reviewed our response to the complaint, we would be happy to discuss that further.
Okay.
This is Lauren. Could I just break in?
Sure, Lauren.
I've been listening. I appreciate the discussion. I saw this morning, I think it's for the first time, the request from the mayor, and I read it. I have not seen the response from the election team. Is that something that you have there or have subsequently sent or will be sending soon?
Thank you, Mr. Lehman. Barbara, I did include you. I thought I included you in the response at about 10:30 this morning. It turns out that the email, I don't know, group email or whatever that I thought you were a part of maybe isn't functional, and so Barbara just forwarded it to you at about 1:15, I think.
Okay, that's fine. I'll look at it. I'll find your response. I'm sure very professional, and I share Mr. Treadwell's comments about the professionalism and how the election was delivered. I don't need to get into some of the detail right now, but I've shared with Barbara Jones and perhaps with Jamie some of my thoughts on how people were handled, which I think perhaps could have been improved at least. But on the other hand, I go on the basis of what somebody, an observer or somebody said to me rather than being there, in person myself. But most of those types of things just have to do with how we might handle the public and people a little bit more carefully to avoid, I guess, avoid conflict. That's all I'm saying. Otherwise, I'm impressed with what your whole election team did, and I've told you that before, and I'll just repeat it now.
Thank you, Mr. Lehman.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or, oh yes,
Yeah,
please state your name.
oh, sorry, this is Lisa Torkelson. I guess one comment, I don't know if this is where I do it, but the signature requirement is slightly different within the state and the muni. If there would be some, I'm assuming that would have to be a code change. But I think the less confusion that we can offer the general public, I mean, even I am confused in this election because there's mail-in, there's this, there's in-person, there's ranked choice, there's vote for the top guy, and, you know, I'm getting through it, but, you know, the general public always gets confused. There's a part of that that happens all the time. But especially when we've got so many different things going on, if we can just simplify it or make it as similar as possible so that people have a chance to be less confused. It's like, oh, I thought there was a signature, or oh, I thought there wasn't supposed to be a signature, or witness, or something like that. If we could kind of make those the same, maybe that would help streamline the process.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Any other comments, contributions? Well, I think then that could be it. We can adjourn the meeting. And it is now,
Do you want to open it up for public comment just in case somebody's on the phone?
Yes, sure. Is there anybody on the phone that would like to comment? Amy says negative, so.
Okay.
Thank you very much for bringing that up. I do appreciate your thoughtfulness. All right, so we will adjourn at 1:38.